go. Here we go. All right, here we go. What it is and what's good, y'all. Welcome back to 280 Plus, the social media podcast where I take the conversations off the timeline and go beyond the tweets. I'm your host, Lowe's Def, and today we got a real special guest. But before we introduce her, if you're new to the channel, I appreciate if you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you can stay up to date with the platform. Hit the like button, it helps the platform grow, and share it with somebody if you can. So, but yeah, today I have a guest with me today. I think she's a pretty important person, like especially with some of the things that she got going on. But can you introduce yourself for the audience, please?
Yeah, so my name's Briaunna Embrey-Banks. I'm best known for being the founder and CEO of Owning My Blackness and Owning My Blackness Consulting. I'm also a substitute teacher, which is pretty exciting, and I'm a big sister of 10.
Oh, wow. Okay. You said big sister of 10?
Yeah, so I'm the second oldest in the lineup, but the oldest sister.
What? Oh my gosh! And everybody's from York. Are you from York? Yeah, are you from York?
So I'm born and raised York, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But I have recently relocated to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Ah, okay, all right. And how did you even hear this platform at all?
I actually heard of it word of mouth.
Okay.
Another fellow entrepreneur, Piera. She runs All Natural Lux, which is a salon, kind of like a salon in a sense, or a place you can get body sculpting, facials, but she's amazing. She's really good. And it's kind of like her niche here in the York area. Okay. So that's kind of how I was introduced to the podcast.
Oh, okay. That's dope. Yeah, I know Piera, and shout out to her and everything that she got going on. I actually was on her brother's podcast a couple weeks ago. He always got some crazy stuff to talk about, but it was fun and stuff like that. But yeah, so you have an organization, and I guess you've kind of pivoted that into a company as well, right? Because there's an organization for students, but then you made into a business. But and one of the things that I see that your focus on is DEI, right? And if you could, just for the audience sake, could you explain what DEI is? And because you're seeing, I think people are seeing that in the headlines, and then there might be some misconceptions. It might be a big umbrella term that some people don't realize, but could you explain, I guess, just start there. What is DEI? What does that stand for? And what is it like?
So DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
Fun fact for anyone who's interested in the topic, I'm actually getting my master's degree in diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
Nice.
One of 10 programs in the nation that offer it right now. So be on the lookout to be a part of their program. Additionally, kind of give you a summarization of what DEI is. Kind of like those big branches of underrepresented groups, whether that would be within race, if you're a minority, or would that be with gender, as including females, disabilities, your sexual orientation, anything you can think of kind of falls under that umbrella. In the terms of diversity aspect of it, things that make you different. It's really that comes across that diversity. The equity part of it is, I know there's been, especially with the 2020, that really popped off the Black Lives Matter movement, this argument between equality and equity.
Yes.
So equity is making sure that people get what they need. Some people might need more support than others to get us all kind of to that same playing field. So that's really what equity is about. And inclusion, that proportion is making sure everyone feels welcome, that they feel like they belong. You may also hear some people say belonging instead of inclusion, but it's really the same thing, making sure we all feel like we belong, that we're included, that we're all part of a community. So that's really the summarization of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay. Yeah. And I like how you make the distinction with equity. There's always a graphic that I've always seen when it comes to equity, especially when it comes to education. And basically, you have these three kids looking over a fence, whatever. So equality would be given every single kid the same thing, whatever. But you might have a taller kid, you might have a medium-sized kid, you might have a smaller kid that needs more help. So equity is leveling the playing field. And I think some people get discouraged with that because there are some bad connotations with things, or at least people make negative connotations, especially when it comes to initiatives like affirmative action and things like that, people feel like, oh, well, they're getting a leg up. And it's like, well, if you look at the totality of things, right, like it's never been fair. So like, all right, yeah, we need to, you know, level the playing field a little bit, and then let's see if we can compete on a fair level, you know what I'm saying? But okay, that's interesting. All right, that's good. That's good. And so we'll get into some DEI stuff in terms of like how it's affecting us nationally, because there's headlines everywhere about stuff. But so what is OMB, owning my blackness? What is that exactly? Because I looked it up, but again, for the audience, people that don't know, what is that? What is it?
Of course. So Owning My Blackness is an organization that works to educate, advocate, and elevate for Black students.
Okay.
What does that mean? So the education piece, we like to educate them on things in history, because if we don't learn about our past, we can't change the future. So a lot of teachings of Black history and things that aren't necessarily taught in schools, and educating our community and making especially our Black and brown students realize that their history did not begin with slavery.
Yes.
And there's so much more to the story than what they're learning in schools, and giving them that representation, that lesson, so that they can make their own distinctions on their own.
Okay.
That advocacy piece, oftentimes a lot of big pieces that goes along with minority groups is that advocacy, trying to make a difference, trying to change things. So really what we focus on is the systematic injustice against Black and brown students within the education system.
Okay.
So for our students, not everyone has to, but for the students who are interested in it, we help them navigate through the educational system, learning how they can do with their advocacy ways, having that honest conversation about what are the benefits, what are the consequences, the reality checks behind it, and knowing that they have some type of support and someone to guide them through the process.
Okay.
And then finally, that elevation piece, that no matter how you fall into this part of OMB, that you feel comfortable within your own skin, that you feel like you have a support system and a family to guide you to the next level. Like I said, we often work with students. So whether that would be the next step in education or getting you set up with a job opportunity, that's kind of what we work with.
Okay.
Now, for those who don't get confused, underneath Owning My Blackness, because we were officially launched a next door branch, you can kind of call it, underneath the organization of a business called Owning My Blackness Consulting.
Okay.
That kind of fights the battle from the other side. So we work with educators to help reduce systematic racism in education through diversity trainings, professional developments, consulting on practices and policies, as well as speaking events where I kind of go around and talk just like this and educate people on what exactly is the crisis against Black students in education and what we can do to fix that.
Okay. Okay. So when it comes to like OMB, how is that different than like a Black Student Union or something like that? You know what I mean? Is it the same? Do they work in conjunction with one another, or is it a totally different type of organization?
Yeah, so I would say the fun thing about the DEI field is that oftentimes people feel like there's like a lot of competition in a sense, but the whole idea behind organizations like OMB is my main goal is not necessarily to try to win a popularity contest or try to get the most funding. Our main goal is to help reduce systematic racism in education. So whether we are working side by side, during events, or whether I'm doing my own thing, you're doing your own thing, we're all working towards the same thing, which is really great about this community, at least in my experience. I've experienced a lot of openness with that. I would say like the main difference is that OMB has now transitioned more from like similar to a sorority in a sense where it's like under the schools and follows the school rules into its own thing. And it's in the process of hopefully in the near future being more like a nonprofit acting in the sense. But I always like to make the distinction of, this isn't necessarily like you have to be a part of one or part of the other. Oftentimes we work with other community organizations, whether that be school clubs, the NAACP, whatever that would be. We are here to help. We're all here to make a difference. Community activists, community leaders, we're all working together. We're not in competition trying to make one better than the other.
Okay. Well, you did say something about like fighting for funding. Has that happened like in other organizations, or has that happened like with your organization? And are you guys receiving funding like from the school, or so to speak, or how does that work? Like,
so I would say the fun thing about funding, again, it's not even necessarily, I would say, a fight. Like I'm not actively attacking someone to try to get funding, or even vice versa. The money is there.
Okay.
There is funding in our areas or whatnot to get. The problem is access to that capital, which is often difficult. At least from what I've seen, it's like things as we've seen in the media and such, sometimes make the little bit of capital that you do have access to very difficult to get. But with this community, I found like so much love and support that we just find a way to make it happen.
Okay.
In a
Okay.
sense. So OMB's been running for about 3 years now.
Nice.
But then its starter beginning stages, it did start off as kind of like a single event, actually.
Okay.
To backtrack a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
OMB
Let's do
started
it.
out as Blackout for Black Lives, which
Okay.
was the only in-person event held that semester, that first semester back from COVID on my college campus.
Okay. Okay.
Blackout for Black Lives was an event that taught about the Black Lives Matter movement. What are the arguments about it? What is the history behind it from both sides? Where do they stem from?
Mm-hmm.
And then we also talked about it through personal stories, poetry, music, artwork, photography. Eventually, the next year we added a step show. So bringing that culture into it and that celebration into it, and really talking about like where do we come from, and a safe place for people to learn no matter where you step on.
Okay.
From there, after that single event, I kind of got the feeling again as a African American student myself, trying to battle this systematic racism, that from an institution standpoint, I have to make that clear, there was no particular individual or position. As an institution, I felt as if there was pressures on, once I graduate, all this work I was doing as a student advocate kind of just be pushed under the rug, like it'll go with her when she leaves. And I didn't
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah.
So
That's powerful. That's good. That's good. That's good.
right. So I started out as a club on campus, which was owning my Blackness. Again, that worked as kind of like your college club where we did events, taught about that Black history, and made students feel comfortable. Within our first year, it went from a club at our college campus to a multi-institutional organization. We branched off and put baby branches in local high schools. And if we didn't have
Oh.
our own branch of Owning My Blackness, again, that inclusive piece, I also mentored other diversity groups at other schools that were willing to work with me and help them navigate through their own struggles of student advocacy, feeling belonging in their community, and just needing a mentor or support system.
Okay.
So I'm now in the process again of, growing, revamping, redoing, and now taking it away from the school now and making it more of a nonprofit thing so we can better expand, better include more schools, more areas, and more students in our areas.
Yeah, you gotta get that 503c, right? Isn't that the nonprofit? Yeah, I know a little bit
Yep.
about that. You know what I mean, just talking to people. So okay, that's good because I was gonna ask you like, so this I know I see it started at your college, and so this was just your college thing, but then so you're saying that you have it. I guess you started the process of expanding into different like high schools and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So it started off as supposed to be my RA event because I worked as a residence assistant. For those who
Okay.
aren't familiar with that position, it's basically student workers on campus. So I work with Residence Life, which is the housing on campus
Yeah.
that plans like fun events for the students, kind of usually around hot topics or fun topics going on at the
Yeah.
time. And essentially, the other position is making sure the dormitories are safe and fun for all the
Don't
students who are
don't
going.
people who have beef with RAs normally like don't people?
It depends. Really, it's what you make of it. If you want to be, I find another misperception of RAs is the fact that they're always out to get you. It's just like those knucklehead kids. Like if you want to be that person who's like out to tattletelling everyone, you
Yeah.
can take the job and do that angle. But really your main job is to make sure that students are safe. Like if you're not blackout drunk about to fall off the balcony of the dormitory. That's
Yeah.
really what the job
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And making sure that you contact proper people to help get that person help. And then also the fun aspects of it, planning fun events, decorations, stuff like that in campus. So I wanted to, as part of my job, do a fun event surrounded by a hot topic at the time, which was Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
There was an outcry from our campus community to address it. There was a need for it that they felt like the school wasn't fulfilling. So I was like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
someone who also cared about the topic. Again, talking about that systematic standpoint that I mentioned before, some people were looking at me like kind of crazy and like, girl, what do you mean you're fighting an entire institution? So some examples of systematic racism versus like a one-on-one person, like being called the
Yes.
N-word or
Yes.
something, which is very different. Some examples to provide you when I wanted to get Blackout for Black Lives off its feet. So again, that first event that stemmed OMB. Like I said, this was my RA event. However, we were also dealing with that other layer at the time, not just Blackout for Black Lives, but COVID,
Oh,
which kind of took
yes.
the nation
Yes.
by storm, and especially the education system.
Yeah.
So again, those are unfamiliar with their residence life or residence assistant position. Those student workers come to campus like a week or two early for trainings to start planning those events and such and get everything off its feet before the students move into the dormitories. They sat us down during RA trainings and looked at all of us and said, no in-person events this semester because of COVID. So we'll do like little Zooms if you want, or you can do like little goodie bags door to door. And I was like, that's great, but hear me out. Hear my idea.
Yeah.
So I sat down with my supervisor at the time. I pitched the idea for Black Out for Black Lives, and I was super excited. And she kind of looked at me like, Briaunna, this is a great idea. It's super fun. I don't have the authority to clear you to do this, because at this point, COVID is above even like the RAs, the residence life or whatever. It's even above the school. Like, this is a national thing taking over. This is a huge deal.
Yeah.
So I said, that's okay. That's fine. I'll find the person who can clear me to do this.
Oh, wow. You just kept going to the top. Okay. All right. That's good.
So a lot of people don't have that
You
same
don't take no
mindset
for an
as
answer.
me.
I see. You don't take no for an answer. Is that what it is?
That's kind of my whole personality. Everybody
That's
who knows
good.
me,
That's good.
I kind of like, I hear you. Like, I kind of hear the no, but that just means maybe not this way. Maybe
Yeah.
you're not the
Not right
avenue I need to
now.
take
It
to get
means
what
not
I
right
need to get
now, or maybe later, or something like that. Like,
for me to get Black Out for Black Lives done, I realized to do an event, first thing I need is a location. I need a place to hold it.
yes.
And dealing with, again, that whole layer of COVID, I was like, probably outside would be the best bet for me to actually have as big as an impact as I want and also follow school and national regulations. So right now, the school's rules is you can have gatherings outside, just be 6 feet apart, all the aspects. So I was like, let me get like one of the fields. So
Okay.
for those unfamiliar with our college, Pennsylvania, there's multiple like soccer fields or whatnot like that. So like, let me reserve one of those, especially before, because remember, school didn't even start yet. So sports aren't really having games or anything yet. Like, before they all take over the fields, let me get one. Let me reserve one.
Yeah.
So I went emailing the people who I've known in the past might have dealings with these fields and could help lead me in the right direction.
Yeah, sure.
And what ended up happening was I'd email one person like, hey, I'm looking to reserve the field for this, They'd look at me and be like, oh, cool, I don't handle that. Go to this person. And then this person would direct me to this person. And this person would direct me to someone who's not working right now because of COVID. And their email would direct me right back to the person I talked to in the first place.
Oh,
So I kept
no.
getting stuck in like an email circles. And again, you also got to remember COVID at the time was a huge part. So I couldn't even just walk down to the offices at this point and talk.
Yeah.
There was none of that. Everything was virtual at this time. So again, my hard-headed self, not knowing the word no or let's not do this, I threw everybody in a single email chain. And I was like, look, someone better tell me who I need to talk to. I'm going to do this with or without your permission. Which is really risky. I don't recommend it for anyone who's a student worker, because I did technically work for the school. So that was not my biggest or brightest idea, but I did.
Yeah.
From there, like within the next day or two from making that big, bold move, I got an email from our school's like diversity office. So like that student diversity office at the time, the college. So the director emailed me, love her to this day. She kind of sat me down. She asked for a meeting. We went to meet in person, which was kind of nice. And she was like, so Briaunna, tell me why you want to do a protest.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, what protest? I want to do my RA event that I get paid to do. I'm just struggling to get it off its feet because of all this COVID stuff.
Oh, so they assumed there was a protest. Like, they assumed that off the bat.
So
like,
he said, the reason you can't get this event off its feet or get any clearances for everything, because there's a rumor within the staff of the school that you want to do a protest. And again, you got to remember everything else that's going on at this time, because that all plays a factor. All those schools who are getting like hit with like protests and stuff are getting really bad press, are getting heat on the media. My institution at the time didn't want that smoke. They didn't want none of that.
Yeah.
She basically sat me down and said that she was told to come shut me down to make sure that this protest did not happen.
Wow.
Luckily for me, that was not her intention. She just wanted to hear me out and ended up helping me navigate through the educational system to get to who I need to talk to get this event off its feet. And eventually, after getting the right message out about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, I ended up with a meeting with the president of the school at the time. And I kind of laid out my ideas, like, here's my event, here's how I plan to navigate through COVID, And at the end of the conversation, I'm getting all the clearances that I need. And I ended up hosting that only in-person event that semester.
Dope. That's dope.
Right. Which was exciting. But of course, I couldn't keep getting away with that. So after that in-person event, I did 2 smaller events called Don't Touch My Hair, part 1 and 2, that talked about the discrimination against African-American hair and the history behind it. Just to give you some things, just a little itty bitty bits of details. For people who say like it's just braids or it's just dreads, I wanted to kind of combat that argument and let people know like why it's such a big deal.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
the idea that different hairstyles back in Africa before the slave trade meant different things. Like if you had your hairstyle in a certain braid pattern, that meant royalty.
Oh,
It
okay.
meant you were unmarried. It meant that you were married. If you were bald or something, it could mean that you were a warrior. Like it had status. Your hair represented status. And then, of course, all the meanings within the slave trade, things like sorry for young children, the African American hair was like cut off and used to stuff furniture and skin, used to make furniture and clothes and so we taught about all that, the history behind it, and petting zoos against African American hair, while also teaching our Black and brown students your curl pattern, how to maintain your curls, how
I
to do
see.
braids, how to do dreads, how to put beads in, how to maintain them, keep them fresh. So when I was doing those events, again, this idea of systematic racism, in a sense, and not a single person looking at me like you can't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is when I started to get the feeling like the more difficult it was to do these events, like things like funding, things like clearances, things like reserving areas, like the difficulties when I started to get that pressure, like they're waiting for me to graduate, so I don't got to deal with this no more. Like they're like, this girl don't know how to listen. She just wants to do what she wants to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Which is fine, which led to the creation of OMB.
Nice.
Now, I just want to provide this one more example, just to get people's like mind who still aren't understanding the levels of systematic versus like individual racism. Once we announced OMB, so to give you a timeline, that fall semester of the school year was Blackout for Black Lives. That spring, I did all the work I needed, and by the end of that semester, I had everything cleared to launch OMB that following fall.
Okay.
I just did all the paperwork, all the meetings, whatever. That summer in between, that fall when OMB was officially launched in the spring that I did that paperwork, the school released an article on me that talked about my idea for owning my Blackness, who is Briaunna, what's this amazing new thing coming to campus. Great, super excited. It finally was set out to the public in that summertime.
Okay.
The school then do what they always do, throw it on the Instagram, promote it on the story. However, the comment section blew up.
Oh, man.
In the comments. Why not owning my whiteness instead of owning my Blackness? This girl doesn't know what she's talking about. Because for those who also don't know, I built OMB straight off of that historical picture that educates. So there's a lot of history, a lot of stats that I included in that article, why this was important. Her like, she's a liar. She's saying Black kids are dumb. I was like, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, calling me racial slurs and attacking me as a person.
Dang.
And then also, my people who don't play that coming in the comment section and fighting them.
Yeah.
So the institution's reaction to this, instead of, standing by their student or whatnot, was to take down the entire article, take down the post, take down the whole article. Nobody could find it.
So censorship, basically. You know what I mean?
But again, I'm that hard-headed kid. So I went blowing up the DMs, like, where's my article? What's wrong with it?
Yeah.
And I just grilled them so much. They eventually looked at me and said, look, whoever was running the page at the time said something was wrong with the article. And they said they need to take it down.
What was wrong with the article?
And put it back up. So I said, what could possibly be wrong with the article? There's nothing to cite check. There's no citing of sources. The entire article is written about me and my idea. You can't find that anywhere else but me, and I already approved of this article.
Yeah, you're a primary source
there's
at
nothing
that point.
To change.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing to change. Like, there's nothing to check that's incorrect or whatnot. So then they were like, listen, like, this is above my head. Like, someone just told me it needs to be taken down. I said, okay, cool. You said it needs to be rewritten. Bet. I went and sent a little email to the author of the article, the one who wrote the article about me, said, hey, like, I heard you guys are making changes. What changes are being made? She emailed me back and said, what changes? I'm not making any edits to your article. What are you talking about? So I waited like another 24 hours.
So you just catching people in lies and stuff like that, basically,
That's why I'm talking about institution. Like, there's no one person. Like, there's not one person's fault. This is an entire institution.
Yeah.
So eventually I got an email back with the original copy of the article and the edited version of the article, and they bolded what they changed. It was about like one or two sentences that was changed. Boo. Nothing within the message of the article changed. Just instead of associating it with what it was, owning my Blackness is a institution's club, like a club under the institution, it put it more under my name.
Yeah.
And so this is a me thing and not necessarily a college thing, but technically all the rights of the time belong to college. Like, I made a school club.
Yeah.
and they put the article back out there, but they kind of soft publish it. Like the article is back up to the public,
But you had
and
to
they kind of
search for
made
it.
like a small Instagram post about it, but they did not put it on the story. They didn't put it on the Facebook like they do everything else. It never made it to the LinkedIn. Like it was not promoted the way they do everything else.
Damn.
So that's one of the many, many examples I started facing as a student advocate through
Yeah. Yeah.
education that I didn't want other students to continue facing. I eventually got to the point where my grades are being changed because of comments that I was making.
Really?
I feared for my safety at some point in the classrooms. Funding was stripped from me at certain points, like a whole systematic change that you cannot pinpoint or blame on a single person or even department.
What? Yo, that's
And you can't even
crazy.
blame the school, because when I don't want people to go back and like, oh, like bad York College, because it's not even them. Again, this is a systematic issue, which means this is a problem across the boards: public, private, charter schools, statewide, nationwide, local wide. I'm one of many, many stories facing this.
Dang, that's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, it has to take like some thick skin to have to deal with certain things like this, especially like you said, starting to fear for your safety. And I think maybe you feel more of a threat because you're a woman, but then I think, maybe you don't, because you're thinking like, people don't really react that way, whatever. But I think, but I commend you, because I feel like, I think people talk about a lot of times, like Black women especially, are a lot of times just on the front lines. And maybe it's because, maybe you guys don't have to deal with certain like threats and things like that, but you're saying that like that was all real for you as well, you know what I mean? And changing your grades, like that seems crazy. Like that's unfortunate.
Yes, I'd say being a Black woman in America alone
Yeah.
is a struggle within itself. And even within DEI, fun fact if you don't know, Black women are one of the most educated demographics across the
Yes.
board,
Yes.
but we are also the most underpaid.
What
And
I
even within this lane that's often created with like Black advocates within DEI, even though we make up a good amount of people within DEI, we're also the ones underserved within this field. We
mm,
get underpaid, underbooked,
yeah.
underrespected.
Well, and I think some people though, like economists and stuff like that, they would argue that, because I see those statistics as well, and they would argue though it's part of the reason why Black women might be underpaid is because of the kind of jobs. Because like when it comes to like college education, STEM is like when it comes to Black women, they're not in STEM fields, and that's where all the money is right now, you know what I mean? Like if you're doing stuff for like social work and things like that, those tend to be like lower paying jobs. But
This is where I'll have to all due respect,
yeah, no, go
disagree
ahead.
with you.
Okay.
Disagree with you. Across the board. So let me again take a step back and I'll revisit this and you'll see how it ties in. I like to start with an education, always bring history into it, because history repeats itself and we see these problems over and over again and currently in present day. So the issues we are talking about right now with underpaid, under treatment goes way back.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's start with, which is why I always like to say, start with education, because that's why I like to call the roots of present day problems, because everyone starts out in schools, they branch out to these different sectors of society. Within schools, one of the major reasons that Black students are suffering, again, this crisis, is the idea of the racial achievement gap and the racial disciplinary gap.
Okay.
For
Okay.
those who are looking at me, go, what in the world are you talking about? Like, I never heard of those.
I-
The racial achievement gap basically says that Black students, when compared to any other race of students, fall behind when it comes to SAT scores, GPA, and graduation rates.
okay.
Now, the other hand, the disciplinary gap says that Black students, when compared to any other race of student, are more subjected to disciplinary actions such as detention, suspensions, and expulsions. That does not mean, however, that Black students are dumb. That does not mean that they act bad, they're not as smart, they're not intelligent, they're not as well behaved as other students. Things that factor into it that we currently see today is the historical standpoint. We are still suffering the things that weren't that long ago, as we all like to believe, of slavery,
Yes, yes.
segregation,
Yep.
and then
Redlining.
also the treatment. Yep, redlining also plays a factor. Not even getting there yet.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
The
okay, okay.
treatment of students, like, yeah, we can be in the same school, but if I'm being forced to sit outside the classroom, I can barely hear, or the teacher respects you more and will give you that extra time outside of the classroom, won't give me, our education will be very different.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right, in that sense, that all plays a factor. And then outside things that they can't control, like redlining. So I know for me, as part of an internship that I did, I actually looked at York County, York, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, the original redlining map that was like drawn up by the banks and the school districts. Surprise, surprise, they line up pretty well of where the funding
Yep.
goes for those areas and those schools that are underserved. And sorry, now you get into the point where these students are now coming from neighborhoods that are underserved, underfunded. And then I didn't even bring in a historical standpoint of guns and drugs being brought into these neighborhoods that now make it an unsafe environment. The aspect of single parent households, that's a big thing within the Black community that likes to be talked about.
Okay.
But then we also don't talk about where that came from. During slavery, they would often split apart families because they didn't want that family dynamic going on, and they'd ship the husband and the wife and kids other places to break up that family dynamic. And it's often something we still see into play today, even if we're not necessarily being ripped apart by slave masters. Our family dynamics have been forever broken since then.
Definitely. The
So
with the
now
prison system, all that type of stuff. Yeah.
So when you start putting a lot of those pieces together, and I didn't even cover all of them, so just a few that I've mentioned, start putting them together and how it affects that one student. If I'm being raised in a single parent household, right, my parent does not have the time of day if they're working multiple jobs to keep a roof over our head because they're underpaid, so they need to work multiple jobs to keep food in our mouths and a roof over our head, to do tutoring, to take me to after school events, to pick me up, to take me places. And I might not have that often support. Then when I get to school, and I might have to help out more in the classroom, or I might have a job when I get home, get involved in things I shouldn't be to try to make money, take care of my younger siblings.
Yeah.
Or if I need internet, I might have to walk down the street or a few blocks to the library to get some, and I may not always be able to do that. And I get to school and all they see is a blank piece of paper and your homework's not done. They give you a fat 0. They don't want to hear ifs, ands, or buts about it. And they call it a day. And they eventually have less patience for those students because of the mindset they have in their heads.
Yes.
So again, when you're talking about that mindset, I'm sorry to keep bringing this history into it.
Nah, it's good. It's good.
I promise I'm circling back here. There was a TED talk that came around where this researcher went into this like elementary school classroom. And she was eventually going in because this young student of color, his mom was getting calls home like on the daily basis, like, come pick up your son, he's acting up, da da da. So she wanted to see what it was about. So she came in and she started noticing this teacher was like calling the student a lot. So she started keeping tally. So it's things like, sit down, be quiet, pay attention. You're not being an active listener. And she started to keep tally. Like I said, that young man's name was called 27 times in 7 minutes.
Dang.
What are the effects of that? That student now learns that school is not a safe place for them. Those other students learn how to treat that student, and the community builds their own idea of the student. Because what happens when those kids go home and your parents go, how was your day? Oh, well, so-and-so got in trouble again and couldn't play at recess. That student now gets the label of a bad student or a bad boy.
Yes.
And then as you move up to the grades, teachers talk, oh, you better keep an eye out for so-and-so. They don't know how to listen. And that disconnect, that trust is also an aspect. So now they're dealing with everything at home, and now at school, they feel like this is not safe. I don't trust you. You don't have my best interest in mind. And by the time they make it up to that high school and college level, there's a disconnect. That no matter if you are the best teacher, if your school has the best resources, the best funding, that they really want to help, they understand all this, that trust is so broken. No matter what you do, I don't believe you have my best interest at heart. Which adds into things like, now the curriculum, I don't understand it. Just like if I would walk up to a white student, like, here's a question about a bodega. They're going to look at me crazy. What is a bodega? Just things like that. Education is tailored towards the white student. So they don't always understand the curriculum. There's not always the patience because of that idea that they're bad students. They don't want to learn. They're not smart. Those labels put on students. They don't want to do the work themselves to meet them halfway, even if they are in great institutions. So it adds this disconnect that adds into things like the racial achievement gap, the racial disciplinary gap. No, those exceller students, because like I said, don't forget, Black women are the number one demographic of educated individuals who do break through and get master's degree, doctorate's degree in all fields, STEM, social work, hospitals, nurse, like get these wonderful degrees. The problem is when students go outside, those teachers, those little kids who learn how to treat them, get big man jobs in corporate and the hospitals and X, Y, and Z in social, those mindsets don't leave. It's
Okay.
not like all of
Okay.
a sudden we get to the workforce that you're a great person or you're super smart or you're no longer bad.
Yeah.
Those mindsets don't leave.
Nah, you're
And
right.
that
You're right.
idea of being a minority and that you are less than me and that scene of it continues to play a part. Now I don't respect your opinion. Now
Mm.
we talk about corporate America. You may have a master's degree, and the white boy next to you may only have a high school GED, but I relate to him more and I feel like I trust him more as my company. So I'm going to promote him over you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough.
There
That's tough.
are there are a good amount of people of color in fields like STEM or healthcare. It's not that they're not there, they're just not being provided the same opportunities.
Okay, okay. And like you said, sometimes those ideas don't go away. Like, yeah, like then as a black person, like yeah, sometimes you have like imposter syndrome. Like you feel like you don't like you feel
We
like
didn't
yeah,
even get to the mental health aspect
yeah,
of that individual going through this whole system.
yeah.
But
So
again, that's that idea of, like I mentioned before, systematic racism and
yes,
not like one on one, like I call you an N word and punch you in the face.
yeah.
There's not one individual you can blame for this. There's not one department. There's not one school. There's not one teacher. There's not one business. This is across the board.
Yeah. Nah, you're right. You're right. And I think that that gets into some of the other issues that kind of that people talk about. I don't want to bring up certain hot button abbreviations that might get me flagged or whatever. But no, like and people don't realize like these things are happening. And I guess what I wanted to ask you though, then, and I guess you gave some examples, like you gave like an overview, whatever, but like because we know the system is it is broken. I mean, public education, it's tough. I mean, I guess I wanted to know, like, do you think these things are these things happening in like mostly underserved communities, like or is it even happening in these other districts? Because I don't what school district did you go to when you were in high school?
So for me, like I said, I was born and raised in York County. I went to a predominantly white institution.
Okay.
Those are under familiar with the PWI or what that means. Predominantly white institution just means most of the kids were white. That was very much a minority student within my school. There wasn't a lot of students or staff that looked like me within my education system.
Yeah.
So I actually went through PWIs from like elementary school all the way through high school, and even where I
College.
started my undergrad was a PWI.
Yeah.
And my experience that I've seen, and then I later on did the research, this is across the board.
Okay.
PWI, inner city school districts, charter schools, that idea of systematic racism very much lives. It just may take on a slightly different face in different places. So, for example, if you're in an inner city school district, that's probably mostly comprised of Black and brown students,
Yes.
correct? But they are still suffering those same consequences as a minority student in a PWI, such as the labelings on them. Just
Oh
instead of
yeah.
maybe an individual student, they get an entire school. Like I said, I substitute teacher at inner city school district. When I told people I was taking the position, all I got was, "Oh, you don't want to teach those kids. Those are
Yeah.
bad kids.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
listen. They get into trouble." Just now you put an entire group of students unlisted. They still suffer those very much same things. And then the problem is because of the lack, because nobody wants to give all this extra funding to a school that thinks full of bad kids that don't want to do anything
Yeah.
or great opportunities. Now they even still lack those opportunities, those necessarily tools, and it makes it even harder to succeed when they get to higher education or places of business because they're not taken seriously. They may not have all the right resources that they need to be successful in here. So, like I said, it's so many layers to it that just add on top of each other that adds into what I like to call the crisis against Black students in America.
That's interesting because I just had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and my homegirl Mirjani, and we was talking about just like moving out of the inner city and trying to provide your kids with certain opportunities and things like that, and the struggles that come with that, because on one hand, you want them to be kind of socialized with like people that look like them and things like that. but you also want them to have better educational opportunities. But since and again, I went to York City schools and whatever, so it was kind of what you made of it, you know what I mean? Because yeah, there are those different labels, there is that the disciplinary aspect of it, where yeah, teachers might not have that much patience with you and things like that. But then I never, when I was K through 12, I didn't go to like Red Lion or Dallas Town or anything like that. So I think in Black parents, I think we have the idea like, well, yeah, I'm gonna get my kid out of a rough neighborhood, but also two, these schools are better because they're better funded, they do have better resources and things like that. But and just assuming that you're gonna automatically get a better education, but you're saying that like the problems exist everywhere. It doesn't just
Yeah. So
exist.
even if necessarily, okay. So if, like I said, a lot of inner city schools get a bad rap because instead of putting that label on an individual student, they put it on the entire student body as a whole,
Yeah.
as minority student. When you take that student out of that environment and put them in PWI, again, it becomes more individualized. Like they start hearing things again from the other students who now learn how to treat that student from very early on. Things
Mm,
like, oh, your hair is nappy, which led to the issue a lot of Black girls consistently straightening their hair.
mm,
Or a young lady who went to school with me. I don't want to mention her name because I didn't have permission to,
yeah.
but we were pretty close growing up. We still keep in contact. She mentioned how in the summertime she would be afraid to spend too much time in the sun because kids would make fun of her for being too dark.
Mm,
And remind you, she was just as light skinned as me. We were around the same shade, and she'd be
yeah.
scared of getting too dark in the summertime
Dang.
because kids would make fun of her, stuff like that. And then also, again, that idea what I talked about, like that racial achievement gap
Mm-hmm.
within PWIs, those lower level classes, those like needs assistance, general level, have compiled of minority students, where a lot of your higher level classes, such as honors or college prep, are full of mostly white students. And again, it has nothing to do with these students not being smart or intelligent. They've eventually had so many labels on them growing up or faced so many of those systematic barriers that I mentioned, they give up on themselves or stuff like that. And they don't get what they really need to be successful. And in those lower level classes, and again, I'm talking from experience, I was always a pretty good student in class. I was usually always in those honors, CP level classes. But science was that one subject for me. I was like, that's not it. So I ended up in one of those lower level classes. And that was the first time in high school. That was the first time I was in a classroom of kids who mostly looked like me. Was in that lower level science class I took.
Yeah.
Now, within that class, the teacher had less patience than my
Mm,
other teachers. As in, like in my CP level classes, some kid could just call out like da 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 da, joke around the teacher, make jokes back, and be cool, cool, cool. Same behavior. Like these kids are acting the exact same in this lower level class, and it's go to the office.
oh wow.
I've already told you about this.
Yeah.
We're not doing this today. You need to focus. You're not listening.
Okay. Okay.
So again, and you can't even blame that one teacher because I said this is across the board. You can find this mostly anywhere. So
Wow.
these students are still suffering the same issues. It just may take a different face to it. So the best analogy I like to make that my mom told me growing up to kind of wrap your brain around what exactly I'm talking about here is like the cell phone
Okay.
and kind of putting that with racism. So although this phone used to look like, like little wire into the wall, you hold it up and now it's a cell phone. The
Yeah.
basic functions of it are the same to be able to communicate to other people.
Yes.
Now, the idea of slavery and that under power, that you're less than, I don't want you to be anything more than what I choose you to be. Although we may not see the chains, the whips, it may take on a different face. We are still very much dealing with the same exact issues we were all those years ago, which
Mm.
wasn't that long ago if you really want to do the math.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're talking about the history of the world. Yeah, it's not that long. It's not that long ago. So dang. So like when a kid, if a student joins OMB, like are they coming to you with specific problems and issues? Like, hey, like I just, every time I try to, get extra help, my teacher's not doing it, or is it more like a generalized type of thing? Like, are they joining more for community, or are they coming to you with specific problems that you have to
People,
solve?
it's all different. I've had students come to me for that advocacy proportion. Like I've had high school students like come out and find me like, hey, we really want your help. We're dealing with that systematic racism in our institution. We want you to help us navigate, mentor, support us in whatever way you see fit. I've also had students just come like, I just want to be a part of something. I want to be, especially in predominantly white institutions, around kids who look like me, understand me, like that culture aspect where I'm fully accepted. Or we've even had students who aren't minority students, who are white, Asian, whatever, who aren't Black or brown students come and join, like, I want to support your issue. I want to learn more about it. Come on in. That's great. Or
Yeah.
I just want to support. I'm just kind of here for the extra mentorship with the grades. I want to learn how to raise my grades. I want that tutoring aspect. So that's why I'm here. Or
Yeah.
we do fun events. We just like to party here and there. So I want to join for that. So everyone comes for different things.
Okay.
Not everyone has to take advantage of every single part of everything we offer with OMB, but it's available to whoever, regardless of race, gender, age, whatever. We're here to support you in what you need.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. I guess I was gonna ask to because yeah, I did have stuff about this. Well, wondering about that the rate. I know you said racial achievement gap, and I was trying to think of the other one because I seen a little video and you were talking about the discipline gap, whatever. How does a person become a member of OMB? Like, what's the process of that?
Yes. So right now, at the time, because I said I'm in like a revamping process. The mentorship for students, I've kind of like paused like public of taking in members as I'm kind of getting the revamps of taking it from the schools just being run by me.
Okay.
I do still have like the kids who are part of it before have stayed a part of it who wanted to as I go through this process. I'm hoping within the next few months to open it back up to the public for students to join, but you can kind of stay up to date on that, on how you can get involved later on, how you can support or get your kids involved in that organization by going to our website, www.owningmyblackness.org, or following us on social media, Owning My Blackness on Facebook, owning.my.blackness on Instagram, or OMB on TikTok. Best ways to keep up, or those are probably the best ways to keep in mind with that. Other ways that you can support right now with OMB, like I said, we just started the business part branch of it under my Blackness Consulting. So if you work for an educational institution, whether that be a school, someone who works with students in any shape, way, or form, because there's a lot of community groups who are actively working with students, you can book myself to come out and do trainings with you, talk about these issues, get more into depth about that history aspect of it and how it plays a role into what we see now and what we can do to fix that. So those are the best ways to say support. And check that out. It's www.ombconsulting.org or Order My Blackness Consulting on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok.
Okay. I wasn't quite done. I know I sound like you was giving like ending plugs or whatever, but I guess I wanted to know like with the consulting though, like how have you gotten a lot of interest like from like PWIs and things like that? Because again, the political landscape just of the country is just it's just constantly shifting. And then you have people that kind of kind of stick their nose up to initiatives like DEI and things like that. So like how has the reception been? Are you starting to get into schools? Are they receptive or are they just trying to do or if they are doing it, are they doing it to kind of check mark a box like, hey, we have to have this because the state require, what I mean? Is it one of those things? I don't know. I wonder.
Right. So my journey with it, again, because I've had a pretty unique journey, I would say. When I was doing Owning My Blackness, like I said, when I was still acting as a school club, I was actually had the wonderful opportunity to work with both York College and the high school that I went to and provided diversity trainings there.
Okay.
As much as we've had that like battle relationship, they've also done a lot to support me and get me to where I'm at today. So that's actually where I got my first experience with doing diversity trainings, the consulting, the rewriting of policies with both of those institutions, which was super exciting. The speaking events and educating people. And I eventually was getting that demand to do it more and more, which is why I was like, pause. Like I need to like make some funding or I'm gonna run out of steam.
Yes.
I'm doing this. It's a lot of work to do these type of things, and I'm doing it completely for free. Like long term, this is not going to last. So which is why I rolled it out the business aspect of it, which would help support not only myself and be able to continue to do the work, but also OMB to keep it alive and keep funding to keep it up and running. The problem as I've had is now trying to get the word out there what exactly I'm doing because I just launched this January.
Okay.
So it's still freshly new. and then also making that transition from people who already knew about me to I'm just doing it because I love it, and now you got to pay me what I'm worth to come out and do it. That's been an interesting transition because everybody's welcome to this work and we're talking about for free. But as soon as I say, you know, you got to pay me to come out and do it, it's been a little bit of a struggle. But I would say not enough where it's like a huge problem right now. It's still really new. So I'm still doing a lot of marketing, promoting of what I do and kind of getting my name out there and just kind of seeing where it goes. So maybe my answer for that question would change in a year or two from now. But for right now, I think it's too early on to call it as either a problem or even a successful area at the moment.
Okay. Real quick, can you talk about I want to congratulate you. You're a member of BSN, the Black Speakers Network. So what is like what is that exact? What does that entail? What is that? Does that just kind of give you a little bit more credibility so you can go into schools, or is that more of a networking type of situation? What is that?
So I'm still fairly new. I've just got accepted into the Black Speakers Network. It's pretty exciting. It's been, at least so far, what I can tell is it's a nice way to get opportunities, which can be kind of difficult as a Black speaker. So almost on a weekly basis, they'll send an email out with all these places looking for speakers, what categories, where they're at, what events, and they'll help you get paid opportunities, which is really nice. You can also get their support with getting like marketing things such as podcasts, interviews, you know, that media proportion of being a speaker that's really important. You get support with your speaker's website, and also just like the name of being a part of the network carries some weight. It makes you seem more credible, more trusted, more like, oh, like they know what they're talking about, which is really nice. Luckily for me, I would say is in my journey, I've gotten a lot of success really fast. Like I said, I'm going to my 3rd year with OMB. But I've won, not only being part of the Black Speakers Network, I won a regional award. I don't know if you're familiar with Makuho by any chance.
I seen that you won this award, but I was not familiar with it. And that had to do with like being an RA or something like or
Yes, so the Makuho stands for Mid-Atlantic Housing. I'm sorry, Mid-Atlantic College and University Housing Officers. So it's essentially for the entire Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Maryland, whoever's in the Mid-Atlantic, the residence lives from all these institutions at the schools are a part of this. And for that particular award, they picked one student out of the entire region. So in 2021, I was the only student out of the entire Mid-Atlantic to win that Commitment to Social Justice Award.
Nice.
So that was super exciting for me. I'm also a member of the York branch of the NAACP, which is super exciting, which was quite an honor. Which is really surprising. I found out a lot of kids these days don't know what the NAACP is, which is almost insane. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
That point. So for those who are unfamiliar, it's like one of the biggest nonprofit organizations that stick up for Black rights in every aspect: housing, education, criminal justice. You can think of it. It's probably under the NAACP. So it's been an honor to also be a member of that, which has been super exciting. So I've had a lot of like really cool opportunities come my way through this. And the Black Speakers Network was just the next one on that list of adding to, which has been super fun.
That's good. So do you think, what do you think your life would be like if there was like a OMB when you were like going to school? And was there, were you a part of anything, any kind of advocacy group? Because, you know, probably, going to a PWI, you know, as a Black student, you probably felt like you was on the island at times. I mean, what were there outlets for you? I mean, when you were younger, or
So
did you have to just kind of push through?
Of anything like that.
Okay.
But I'd say my kind of safe haven for going through my PWIs was, I think it really started to form like within high school, which was a really important era for me, was getting my friends who were also students of color, really having that solid friend group where I felt more comfortable wearing my natural hair out. And I felt like more comfortable, just being myself. Like I felt less judged. Because I would say, at least I can only speak from my experience being the PWIs. It did often feel like, as I mentioned, that friend I mentioned, talk about their hair and not being too dark. It felt like to the boys, like I wasn't as pretty being an African American student. Also, I didn't get as many opportunities as other kids, so I was overly involved. Student government. I was on the basketball team. Even started as captain one year, so super exciting. I did school plays. I think one year I was in the musical, I was in concert choir. But like some of those special things about school, like solos, for example, in concert choir, it was like the same kids being picked over and over again, and not many of them were students of color. And that's like something that nobody, that systematic aspect, like nobody ever said the students of color can't have these positions, or even particularly like made it a thing. But
Yeah.
it was something that we took note of as students of color, like, oh, like this might not be whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also it got to the point where I was actually in homecoming court. And so
Hey.
was another student of color, like another lady of color. And that was like a huge thing for our school. And we started hearing rumors from the parents and the students about two Black girls being on homecoming court. So like little things like that, like nobody, there's no rule in any book that says we can't serve on homecoming court. But the problems we face that other students did not have to is that systematic oppression that I was mentioning before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's deep. That's deep. I guess I had one little question, and because it's something that keeps getting brought up in this episode. How do you feel about language in terms of like whether it's if you're black, whether it's person of color, African American, minority, like what do you use all those terms interchangeably, or there's certain terms? Because like I don't like POC. I hate that because like only because it's like
Mhm.
sometimes like certain groups they lump us all together, whatever, and then not everybody necessarily has the same interests, what I mean, and then just the way like the census works, like they try to eliminate certain groups so that like certain populations get more like being Latino, like you're not really like there's a whole nother distinction, like there's like white
Yep.
Latino versus what I mean, so like I don't know, how do you like do you use those terms interchangeably? Because I don't even think I say African American anymore. I say black.
So
Black, like
as I mentioned, I don't know if anybody caught in the beginning of this interview, I'm currently getting my master's degree in diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership.
yeah.
So within the program, that's been something we continually bring up is this idea of language and the sensitivity around it.
Yeah.
Despite what people may think, words in our language hold a lot of power, a lot of history behind them.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, language, especially when it comes to diversity and race and grouping people, has changed so much throughout history. And it's really got to go with what's appropriate and what's respected at the time.
Okay.
So there was a point in time where it was disrespectful for you not to call Black people African Americans,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
or for you to call them Blacks, even at the time, was disrespectful. So, or there was people of color or minorities. So I kind of just go with what is the most appropriate language for what I know at the time.
Okay.
And from my latest point of education, it seems the most widely accepted to say people of color are Black people or Black Americans, because that is exactly what I'm referring to, or Black and brown students, because that's who I particularly mean. Versus saying like people of color, if I say people of color, that can include Asians, Latinos. It makes it very unclear who I'm talking about, especially when I'm talking
Yes.
about a very particular demographic. So
Yes.
I just like to make sure I watch my language, and it's still something I'm working on. I'm not perfect. So still
Yeah.
actively learning and actively practice what I'm learning. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I take about with the language aspect.
No, that's fair because, and I think but I think it gets confusing even to people that aren't, part of those groups, whatever. Like they walk on eggshells and they try to figure out like what, because yeah, like people of color turns into color people, and then if you call me a color person, I'm gonna be like, what, like yeah, I mean, like, are we in 1960 in the 1960s? I'm gonna shake my head a little bit, but I get it, what I mean. I think we're all trying, but that's the struggle though. I think people don't realize like I seen a post, whatever, it was like a couple months ago, whatever, and it was this black woman. She was like, she remembers the time that black people became African Americans, like literally in the media, like it was like a shift or whatever. And she was like, oh, like and her comment was, I think she heard a white lady that said to her like, they don't even know who they are, like they don't even know what they are, what I'm saying, whatever. And that's a struggle, and I don't even think that I mean, people can understand the scope of that. I mean, when you talk about you breaking up the family units, but also too us not having those ties to our origins and our ancestry and things like that. It, like
But it's
it
also important
tough.
to recognize that like the idea of language changing is a thing across all races, I would say. Like
Yeah.
even who's included, and when we say white people, has
Yes.
changed so many
Oh
times
yeah.
throughout
Yeah.
the years. Like there's a point in time like Irish Americans weren't as accepted as white people, or Jewish
Yes.
Americans weren't accepted as white. So when we talk about this language, it's really forever changing. So it's really important to kind of figure out what's appropriate and respected, especially within that demographic that you're talking about, what they prefer at the time, because language is forever changing, it's forever being inclusive or disinclusive to certain and different groups. So I feel like that's something actively learning in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. And I guess before we go, I did have like two, I guess, DEI related topics. One of them, and I guess and we could just talk about this in general, you know what I mean? But so again, a lot of this type of stuff, it come like it maybe it shouldn't be political, but it has been politicized, right? And you got, you know, in Florida, right? You got Governor DeSantis. He's probably the biggest voice, I feel like, when it comes to this. But he passed a bill that stopped DEI funding in colleges and universities, whatever. And I guess what I want to ask you is, so because you're all in on this, right? Like this is what, you know, you're getting your master's in this and things like that, right? So like, do you worry about like the landscape of the country changing? Like, I mean, because, you know, all it takes is precedent, you know what I mean, to happen. Like once certain laws are passed, you know, other states just copy what other states are doing, and they
Yep,
like, oh,
very much so.
you're like, oh, that makes sense, whatever. So like, you know, how do you feel about, I guess maybe what he's done, or maybe if you know any details of what he's done, and then like how, what do you think the landscape of this country, like how do you think it's going to change in
Mhm.
the next couple of years?
So
And
I would say
that's a big question,
it is a really big question.
that's a,
I would say something, I don't want to say gives me comfort, but gives me some idea of what could be to come. The
okay,
idea of always looking back in history. It's a
okay,
big one. Because again, this is not the first, it's different words. We taught diversity, equity, inclusion now, but this whole idea of acceptance and bringing minorities to the table and putting them in positions of power, or even talking about these issues, has been something we've consistently struggled with in this country throughout the years.
yes,
This whole principle of putting laws in a place to stop that is nothing new. For example, like the Black codes after Nat Turner. Those who are unfamiliar, just a really, really quick recap. Nat Turner was a slave who was taught religion, how to read and how to write, who ended up running something called the Nat Turner Rebellion, where he ended up freeing a bunch of slaves and led a rebellion against slave masters, where he ended up killing a lot of slave masters and their entire families, to the point where it ended up ending in white mobs getting very, very angry and killing almost double the amount of Black people, or even banishing them, including Nat Turner himself eventually. And from there, they created something called the Black Codes or the Black Laws, where
mm-hmm.
they would prohibit teaching slaves how to read, how to write, and to be able to learn certain aspects of religion, how to gather into union. So the aspects they didn't want, you may have heard grandparents say, oh, they don't want us to get together and rebel against. That comes back from history, the whole idea behind that, because they essentially said they don't want large numbers of Black people to meet because they were afraid of them rising up and doing another rebellion
Yes,
again.
yes,
So when we talk about things like that, like these are again not the first laws set in a place to stop us from talking, learning, educating ourselves on what happened in the past and what we can do to fix it in the future. To me, it just kind of seems like history repeating itself. Instead of this time, instead of we're saying you can't read, you can't write, you can't gather, now we're saying you can't talk about this in our schools, you can't learn about where this came from, and you shouldn't learn how to fix it in the future. That's pretty
yeah,
much what I'm hearing. Like the same thing, and it really comes back to that same basic idea of what I mentioned before, the same principles of even slavery and why they did it. I'm here and I want you to stay here.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Basic
yeah,
that's what it essentially comes down to. So that's kind of what I see it as. It is a little scary because it finally, like, now an entire field where you can make money off of it, you know, provide for your family, educate while making a difference in something you're passionate about, that they might try to make it illegal across the board. Because as we all know, we've seen, even with recent laws like marijuana and abortion, it takes one place to say it, and
yep,
then many, many states are to come to follow. So it is something that I'm like kind of like watching out for, which is kind of
okay.
scary because, like I said, I'm now getting an entire degree, which is like thousands of dollars into that. So Briaunna trying to ban it is real crazy.
Right, right, real crazy, yeah,
But
yeah,
It's one of those things of like disappointed but not surprised.
Okay.
I would
Okay.
say.
Well, and I guess, when something is like a hot button topic, whatever, there always is going to be two sides. So like maybe there is always going to be a career in that, because there's always going to be somebody, what I mean? Like you're going to have advocates of it, then you're going to have people that are, dissenters of it, you know what I mean? So, yeah, so maybe it does bode well. It's not something that's going to be obsolete, especially if the way the current, cultural climate is the way it is, it ain't going away. So that's interesting. And then, yeah, so yeah, I wonder what is going to happen with some of that type of stuff. And hopefully, hopefully he doesn't win an election, because then he'll have national influence, and then we don't want to even think about that, you know what I'm saying? So all right, and then last thing, so there was a video that I seen you post on your story, and then I watched the video and I was like, oh my god, like this is I guess this is all related to what we're talking about overall. And it was the caption, it just says Black Mermaids, whatever. So did you see the new mermaid Little Mermaid movie?
I did see the new Little Mermaid.
Okay, so I saw it too. I didn't like it, not because of the actress or that like that. I just it's not for me. I'm not the target audience for that, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't care. I mean, Ariel could be black, she could be Spanish. I don't care, whatever. It's just it's not for me, whatever. But I watched it. I mean, just because I had to watch it, whatever. So but obviously we see in the headlines, internationally it hasn't been doing well in certain countries, because and obviously it's that, like you're talking about, maybe it's that systemic type of racism and things like that. People just up in arms about things, whatever. So so this video talks about whitewashing in Hollywood, but also I guess we can react to like just this idea of representation, because that's why they did it. That's why they put uh Halle Bailey as Ariel, just for representation. And I think representation is important. But I always wonder, like, why do people get up in arms, whatever. But let me share this video real quick for the audience, and so they know what we talk about, and then we'll just react to that, and then we'll wrap it up to go.
No problem.
All right, let me share this screen real quick. Let's share it up.
Can't there be a white Tiana? Or a white Black Panther? So I know it's mostly racist trolls asking this question, but I find it interesting that they can pretend that this exact scenario hasn't happened countless times throughout the history of Hollywood. So just to refresh your memory, here are some of Hollywood's most notorious cases of whitewashing. So we gotta start out with the classics like Maria, a brown Puerto Rican in West Side Story, being portrayed by Natalie Wood, a white American of Russian descent. And here we have Marlon Brando, a white man from Nebraska, playing Sakini, a Japanese interpreter. And of course, a British actor, Laurence Olivier, playing Othello, an African Moor. But make no mistake, there's absolutely no shortage of modern day examples as well. Like we have our classic whitening of Bible characters. Like here we have Jesus, a West Asian ethnically Jewish man played by a white American Jim Caviezel in The Passion of Christ. And Ramses, an African pharaoh played by white Australian Joel Edgerton. And actually the same movie that British actor Christian Bale plays Moses, a Jewish man of West Asian descent who was raised in Africa. The director of this movie even knew what he was doing and justified his decision by saying, I can't mount a film of this budget and say that my lead actor is Mohammed so-and-so from such and such. And just to rapid fire some more, Angelina Jolie showing off her natural curls as the multiracial Marianne Pearl in A Mighty Heart. And Jolie again in the movie Wanted as the character Fox, a character who was actually visually based off of Halle Berry. And of course we have to mention the whitewashing incident that ruined my childhood, which was Nicola Peltz and Jackson Rathbone being casted as siblings Katara and Sokka, who originally present as indigenous North Americans. And I can't leave out a Twitter favorite, which is Scarlett Johansson being cast as Major Motoko Kusanagi in Ghost in the Shell. And this led us to Johansson's enlightening quote where she said, as an actor, I should be allowed to play any person or any tree. And I wanted to end on one that I actually didn't know about before doing research for this video, but that still made me want to wash my eyes out. In just 2016, British actor Joseph Fiennes played Black American Michael Jackson, and this was the outcome.
That's nasty. That's nasty right there.
And as you can see, it's this historical, imbalanced, and racist dynamic of whitewashing that's the exact reason actors of color don't have enough major roles in the first place. And in my opinion, this racist history necessitates positive on-screen representation for Black and other people of color. Share this video with someone who might learn something new. Let me know if you want a part 2 below. Comment some examples I left out and follow for more.
Dang. So yeah, obviously you posted that resonated with you a little bit, whatever. What was your reaction to that? You know what I mean? Some of those roles and things like that.
So like I said, I did go see Little Mermaid. I actually had a completely different reaction. I absolutely loved the movie, but that's also probably because I am a big Disney fan and I'm a fan of the original Little Mermaid.
Yes.
I'm also a huge fan of Halle and Chloe. So it was great for me. It was a great experience. And it's funny, I actually took 2 of my mentees from OMB and we went to go see it together.
That's
So
dope. That's dope.
It was a great time. Great moment for the culture.
That's dope.
Now,
that's dope.
I would say for me, the reason I kind of feel the need to kind of speak out on this topic about representation and why people are kind of going against this idea of making Little Mermaid Black. Not only had the video mentioned that this has been done over and over again with changing races of characters throughout history in Hollywood many times.
Many times, yeah,
many times before. But it was also the lengths at which this was taken on an international realm to talk about. It wasn't at her talent. No one, I have yet to see a post that says she can't sing, she can't act. It was things like coming at how she looks or making like her eyes really spread apart or calling her racial slurs or even like altering her pictures to look like inappropriate things. That's basically just making fun of her for being Black
that's
and having Black features. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's this aspect of you don't got no other problems except for the fact she's being Black. And the things that make me even more upset about seeing it is those people kind of tiptoe like on the line, like, oh, like it's not my problem isn't that she's Black, but it's the fact that they like I just love the original so much. And it's just like we're also changing that history. And it's like, okay, but this is a make-believe fish.
that's
like
my
mermaids aren't real. Like this would be a little bit different if we talked about like some like the other characters mentioned in that video, like people who are based off of historic like real areas and based off of real people that do exist and their culture does play a factor into it. So for example, if we're talking about like putting like a white main character in a story of Africa and playing an African character, some things wouldn't make any sense because of the culture dynamic, the weather, the culture, the dancing, the food, the music, like it just wouldn't fit. Here we're talking about the ocean, most of it undiscovered to this day. We don't know what's there.
We don't know what's down there.
We don't know what's down there. We don't know what they look like. This is made up. It's a made up story.
Yes.
The affecting, even making her green, pink, purple, gold, silver does not change the aspect of the story. And the fact that no one can really use that as an argument further proves my point. Now, I also want to take this time to highlight within Hollywood and talking about the issues between race and stuff, that even times we're talking about representation, Hollywood will give us snippets into history that we don't even pay attention to, that we think is for slight entertainment, but it's really like picking fun of real things that happen. So I feel like the best example I can give us, have you ever seen like the horror movie The Purge?
Yes.
I feel like most people don't know The Purge happened in real life. That was a real thing.
What you talking about?
Have you ever heard of the Red Summer of 1919?
No, not quite. No. What is that?
Basically, the Red Summer of 1919. This is a little after the Emancipation. So basically,
you about to tell me something bad.
The slaves were quote unquote freed, whatever that sentence means. There was a thing called the Great Migration, where a lot of slaves from the South moved up to the North for hopes of better life, better promises, better opportunity, whatnot. And also many people of color ended up serving with a lot of white men into World War, I think it was World War One, yes. Around the time that they came back, around that May, getting into that June, there was a lot of heightened racial tensions because when all these soldiers came back and were looking for a job, and again, all these Black people were migrating to the North at the time, they took advantage of those opportunities, a lot of those job openings because of the war and stuff, took it, and now white people felt threatened, like, oh, they took over the jobs, like they're not staying in their place, and which really makes me mad, especially when I talk about education, because that's where I specialize in. We talk about like the North loved Black people. No, they did not.
Nah, yeah, you're right.
No,
You're
they did
right.
not.
You're right.
So they felt very threatened by it. They're like, they don't know their place. This is why we shouldn't have ended slavery. This is the problem with all this, all that jazz. So it led to a lot of heightened racial tensions. And it eventually got to the point, just to talk about, the Red Summer ended up having over 25 cities in 1919. But I'm going to focus just for this part where it kind of started in DC. Also around this time is when Woodrow Wilson won the presidency. And for those who don't know, that was like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Black voter turnout for the Democratic Party for president. And so because of his promises of new opportunities and a fresh start, Black people really bought into that, thought it was a great thing. However, when all these racial tensions started to come in, he's officially president in the office for the first few weeks. It got to the point where a lot of Black men were being falsely accused of sexually assaulting white women. And eventually it got to like the right one, right time type of situation. And the white lady who was unfortunately attacked, her husband worked with the military, I forget which branch, soldiers who were coming back. And there was a time, I think it was in the New York Times that released it, one of the popular news articles at the time, newspapers, released an article talking about her sexual assault and actually named an innocent Black man innocent. He had nothing to do with it, knew nothing about it, but they listed him by name anyways, and so that he was responsible. So this man came back, was like, not my wife, gathered all his military friends together to go hunt down this Black man listed in the papers. And again, it's all this heightened racial tensions. People are all for it. Like, not only are they taking our jobs, but I told you they were bad. They're harming our women, stuff like that. Yeah. So eventually got to the point where this young Black man was out with his wife, and they ended up being attacked by an angry white mob. Trying to stick up for that woman and actually chased the entire way back to their house, like guns flying out at them, everything. They did end up surviving. Their neighbors kind of came to bat and was like fighting them off, like no. But unfortunately, during that battle between the neighbors, one of the white mob members got injured, which kind of set off the Red Summer. And basically what ended up happening is entire white mobs are going after Black people, ripping them out of their home, murdering, injuring, killing them in the name of this. And it just became it worse because these Black people are now calling their state and local governments and police stations like, hey, can you help? And they were just ignoring the calls. Like they were just pretending like it didn't happen.
So like the Purge, it was almost permissible to do.
So as I said, it just started growing, and it eventually got to the point where it ended up happening in multiple cities. So again, another big example. I said it happened. I can't go through all 25. We don't have time. Of course,
no, yeah.
But another huge example was Chicago. A young man was in the ocean and kind of like an inner tube. Don't ask me how they segregated the ocean, but he accidentally floated off in his raft into the white section of the beach.
Oh, what the heck?
So the white people were not very happy about that. So they gathered some rocks and threw it at him. And the right rock hit him in the head, and he fell unconscious and ended up drowning in the water. Dang. Because of that, there was a huge, again, stemming from the already racial tension, especially with everything happening in DC at the time that I just mentioned. There was a huge racial outcry. The Black people were like, police, you need to do something. You need to arrest these people. Like, it's getting too much. Like, now they're killing us. Like, that was finally like the last straw. The white people were kind of doing their arguments. Like, no, you need to know your place. You should have known to stay over there. Da 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 da. And it led to like the same thing: bombings, ripping families apart, killings, hurting people. And then eventually got to the point where now, like, they're calling like the federal government, they're calling the state government. And at this time, instead of just picking up, they're just not picking up and ignoring them. They're eventually just like, we're not doing anything. Like, we're not going to help you. Like, just straight up told them, like, we're not going to help you. Yeah. And it ended up happening, like I said, around, I believe, like 25 cities in that summer of 1919, on which I called the Red Summer, where it was basically legalized harm and murder to Black people. Thousands of hundreds. I mean, there was a few hundred Black people, I think, that recorded either injured or killed during this time. And to this day, from there, because it ended up happening is Woodrow Wilson finally woke up and was like, oh, this looks bad for us, and sent like the militia down to kind of shut it down. No one has been arrested for this. No one has been held accountable for these crimes that have happened. It eventually got to the point where the government kind of blamed the newspapers for hyping it up and keeping it going. But when the NAACP at the time tried to like follow suit and like try to pursue a lawsuit against the newspapers and also try to investigate some of the deaths that happened. The government shut it down, so like we're not going to do that actually.
Yeah.
So we basically legalized murder, just like the Purge.
Yeah, just like the Purge. Damn.
Which is a way newer movie.
Yeah.
And we like to pretend like this is something fictional, but like no, it happened to hundreds of Black people who lost their lives because of that.
Damn, I don't think I knew. Yeah, I didn't know that tidbit of history. As it pertains, especially as it pertains to the Purge. Like, dang, that's crazy. But yeah, like just like you were saying, it's one thing. I don't know. It's just the hypocrisy of it, just in the sense of, it's, when they're in some type of like a biopic, whatever, they're like, oh, I should be like Scarlett Johansson. I should be able to play whoever, you know what I mean, whatever. But then the fans, though, they get upset about fictional characters, like people that like, these are not, Ariel is not a real person, so like why does it matter what she is, you know what I'm saying? But like, yeah, it'll be something. And obviously she was playing like some type of Asian woman, whatever, but it could be a real person, and she's portraying that person, and nobody finds the issue with that. Nobody even bats an eye. They don't even, only we do. Only we have a problem with it. But it's like, so it's just funny, like the hypocrisy of it. And there's tons of examples. And then it gets even deeper when you get into like, and this is where I want to stay away from, but like then you get into like a colorism thing, because then there's roles where like historically, certain shades of Black people should be playing stuff, and then they have somebody of a lighter tone, and it's like, then it's just this like vicious cycle, whatever. But I think when it comes to that type of stuff, people, they want us to be fighting amongst ourselves, and I think we need to I think we need to kind of get past some of that type of stuff, even though it does exist. It does exist, but it don't help us, you know what I mean, with that kind of fight. But wow, that's good. Yeah. So you had a good time today? You had,
I
you
did
got your
really
message out?
enjoy. Everything is pretty good, pretty smooth for me on my end.
Yeah.
I enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for having me.
No doubt. So, again, before you go, where can people find you? Getting a part of your organizations, trying to, you can solicit your business right now. Plug anything you got to plug. Go ahead.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, my brand is called Owning My Blackness. So you can even just Google search Owning My Blackness and you can find it. And the business is Owning My Blackness Consulting. Our websites are www.owningmyblackness.org. or www.ombconsulting.org. You can find us on Facebook, both Owning My Blackness, Owning My Blackness Consulting, Instagram, Owning My Blackness or OMB Consulting. TikTok, there's also OMB Consulting and OMB, or you can follow me, Briaunna Embrey-Banks, and you can stay up to date on all the latest projects we're doing.
That's what's up. Yo, Briaunna, you're doing some real good work. I know I just met you today, for real. But I'm proud of the things that you're doing. I think it's needed, it's necessary, it's needed, and and that can't be stated enough. You're doing the stuff and putting yourself out there and putting yourself in situations that most people wouldn't want to put themselves in. And it's just that idea of like not taking no for an answer. That's admirable. And that's something that just the youth and people coming up, and even your peers can kind of look to that and get inspiration. So hopefully, anybody that's watching this, you take something from this. If you are in, post-secondary education setting, if you are in your county, Pennsylvania, look up OMB and see what opportunities, whether it's, I guess, to even be a part of it, to help out, if you need the help.
So we do mentee work. We do, like I said, professional development. So I do speaking opportunities. We do it all. And like I said, you can always reach out. Most likely through the websites. You can always book a free consultation with me, just to kind of talk and realize how we can work together, and we can always just figure it out, take it one step at a time.
That's what's up. That's what it's about, one step at a time. So if y'all still watching the platform, I need y'all to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, go to Instagram, follow her on all her platforms and things like that. And this is another episode of the 280 Plus podcast, y'all. We out. Peace.